Kelcey Lehrich says e-commerce is not a business model. I say he is wrong. It is a business model, and we're going to argue about it. And most importantly, we're going to talk about why it matters. Listen to this episode if you want to think through how the way cash moves through your business, how the way your P&L is organized, your balance sheet is organized, how those things impact the actual outcomes you're trying to drive from a guy who rescues e-commerce businesses out of debt and turns them into thriving profit machines. Let's talk to Kelcey Lehrich from 365 Holdings. I'm quoting now, Kelcey, from a tweet from you only moments ago. About to hop on a podcast with Andrew J. Ferris and argue with him will be super embarrassing when he posts the recording of him taking a major L, but he asked for it. That's a lot of confidence that you're about to argue with me and destroy me in some kind of an argument, even though I already know what your argument is and I'm certain I'm right.
I've thought through this a fair bit, and I have an equal amount of bravado, and I'm going to enjoy the conversation.
The thing that's going to be annoying to people up front is that I bet you I don't disagree with you very much on it, but there's like basically one thing that I care about in this conversation, and so we'll get to it. Okay, here's what the conversation is. You and I have been arguing about whether or not e-commerce is a business model. Mm-hmm. You say no, definitely not. I say yes, e-commerce is a business model. We've argued about this, and it becomes semantic. So, I mean, there's one way of looking at this, which is like it doesn't matter. Like who cares? But I think it matters, and I think it matters for a really specific reason. But I'll give you the mic first. You sure. Tell me why e-commerce is not a business model, and more importantly, tell me why I should care.
E-commerce is not a business model. It is a sales channel or a go-to-market strategy for your business. And the reason why you should care is because the people that listen to this podcast and the circles that you and I run in, it's very easy to find a guru, an influencer, some might say, a sharp guy like yourself, Andrew, that buys media and tells the world how to do it better, that you look up to for advice and insights and wisdom on how to grow your business. And when you start believing the lie that your business is an e-commerce business, it's easy to begin to generalize and rationalize a lot of broad commentary that just may not really apply to you and your company. So I think the danger for a lot of people when they're seeking advice, seeking wisdom, researching, they're listening to podcasts, reading tweets, going to conferences, trying to soak up ideas to succeed and win in their business. And they're like, oh, I'm in e-commerce. And then one guy is running Google ads, drop shipping aftermarket auto parts on a WooCommerce store. The next guy has a supplement business that only runs Facebook ads and a little bit of email. The third person is doing TikTok shops. The fourth is an Amazon seller. The next one is a make-to-order custom products business. These are wildly different businesses. They use different advertising channels. They have different cash conversion cycles. They have different demand cycles. Like they're completely different. Yeah, we rationalize they're all just e-commerce businesses and they should all, take advice from each other. I just think it can be dangerous in some instances. So yes, if you run a Shopify store and you run Facebook ads, there's a lot of broad similarities, one business to another. But I think that defining your business by your sales channel is a mistake, because if other industries did that, we wouldn't be flying on airlines. We'd be flying on e-commerce companies, because who's ever bought an airline ticket any place other than a website? And if you were a sales business, you could be selling cars, you could be selling insurance, you could be selling nuts and bolts. Yeah, we know that an insurance agency, a car dealership, and a nuts and bolts factory are very obviously different industries, but they all use sales as their sales channel. So are they all sales businesses? Like, of course not. So that's the danger, is you get very different business models: cash conversion cycle, demand, supply chain, the way the P&L looks, the way the balance sheet needs to look, total addressable market, all these different dynamics, and you just roll them up into this convenient word of e-commerce. And I think that some people, it can do a disservice to.
Well, we've done two things here right away. The first is, I think there's a lot of light here alongside any potential heat, in the sense that I did an episode with Olivia Corey a couple of weeks ago, and one of the things she was talking about was she was disagreeing with a piece of advice that I've given at times, which is like, trust the experts. That's a piece of advice I really like. Trust the experts. And her argument.
It's easy to say as an expert, right?
Well, I mean, I suppose that's
true,
me
jabbing at you. That's me jabbing.
No. It's fine.
I love you. You are worthy of taking advice from. I've taken a lot of advice from you.
But I mean, the thing that she brings up that is right is like, which ones, right? So, because like I disagree with plenty of people who are talking about the same subject matter to me all the time. So this is like the problem, and you brought it up in terms of right away when you framed your response to that question, you framed it as there's a lot of people talking about how to do it, and you got to figure out who to take advice from. And if you think of all of it as one business model, then all of the advice is in play. But if you start actually chunking it out into more specific kinds of businesses, a supplement company, for example, versus, whatever other kind of business, like that ostensibly is an e-commerce business, like you end up having this thing where like what powers business A is very different than what powers business B. And therefore, who knows which one you should actually be taking advice from, And I think this is something I was struggling with in my response to Olivia, which was like, on the one hand, I really reject the test everything mentality. I don't like that. I think it's a bad idea. You'll end up losing a lot of money trying to test everything. What you should actually do is use well-worn principles and try to do them. But the problem in my response to her, even at the time, and something I've still thought about, is like, well, okay, but how do you actually help somebody sort through which advice to trust, which experts to trust? And you've just said something interesting, which is essentially maybe one thing to do is to drill closer into what is unique about your business, who else is doing things that are like your business. And then can you listen to them? Because if you think of everybody as being in the same industry, then there's going to be people who are doing things that really don't apply to you in the same way. And there's a similar principle here that I've also been thinking about recently, which is about the size of businesses, because a $1 million e-commerce business is very different, even if it's the exact same industry, as a $100 million e-commerce business. And, this is sort of one of my reflections on TextCloud's Super Bowl ad, is like, it's like amazing, huge fan, amazing that those guys are sharing information for free all the time. Amazing. Like I period, stop. Right?
There's like four
awesome.
people that can relate to it.
Exactly. If you're not it's sort of the ultimate picture. If you have if you have a Super Bowl ad with Pete Davidson, your approach to marketing is simply not relatable for my $10 million clients. Forget my $1 million clients, it's just a different deal. So, so you have to start chunking, you have to start narrowing down into who his businesses are actually more like yours. But here's my counter argument to you in all that. Having said all of that, first of all, I think I would probably be more likely to say D2C is a business model more than e-commerce, because e-commerce even includes Amazon, which is really a whole different beast, and some of that. So I'll narrow it to D2C as a business model. So maybe you have me, maybe there's a point, Kelcey, by calling it e-commerce business model. That's wrong. D2C is business model. Okay. But here's the thing. What I would say is there are things about D2C businesses that are real close to being universally applicable for D2C businesses to work, including the fact that right there in the name is that you ship a product to a customer's door. And that process of going from your warehouse to a customer's door directly and not having another thing, the thing that defines D2C as D2C, that itself suggests something about the business. Now, maybe it's better to call it a sales channel, and that sales channel has unique values or not. But that is why I care about it.
Here's a really easy, really hard time to give you. It's like, what does a D2C business mean? Like, what if my product's on the shelf at Target, but I do 80% of my revenue on my .com? Am I still a D2C business?
Yeah.
What if I also have owned retail and it's 20% of my revenue?
Not anymore.
Am I still
Not anymore.
So what do you mean by a D2C business? Is it 100% sales?
But what I would say is the moment you add Target, your business model changes, right? You are now a different business model than before. That's part of the point, is that now the business changes so fundamentally in the way that you operate. All the things you said earlier, your cash, the way cash moves through your business when you add mass retail is drastically different than when it was D2C. Yeah. The way you measure your marketing is drastically different than when it was D2C. And so the business has the ability to change models or to make their model more complex or whatever. But yes, it is now a different model of business. It is so different. And this is the problem with just calling it a sales channel, is like, it almost sounds like there's something core to the business that and there are things, of course, that are core to the business that then are replicable across other channels. That's, of course, true to some degree if it's the same product. But it is so completely different precisely on the terms that you laid out earlier, which is that the model now changes drastically because of those channels. That's how big of a deal that channel is. So this is why it's sort of semantics, but also clarifying why the semantics matter, I think, is important.
I find it really interesting. It's the first example I could think of where a group of people decide to classify their work by the way they go to market. I don't know that you could describe that as having happened elsewhere. Maybe we think of
MLM?
live. Sure, I'll give you that one.
Yeah.
But again, like what happens when the MLM then goes to retail or whatever else? But yeah, that's probably a good
see,
example.
MLM is definitely a business model. Like it's
For sure. Yeah.
You know, it's not
Anybody
just a sales channel.
Had a friend from 5 years ago call them up for a Tupperware party knows what that is. Yeah, I get it.
Right. But see, MLM is another good example of this. The point is there's things about that approach to going to market that are so definitive about the business and what makes the business work financially that it is worth really getting them right if you are going to do that. You have to think about the whole business through that lens. And for D2C businesses, that's what I would say is the same thing. There's these principles in play. Now, those principles do vary by category a lot. So that's where maybe like you point Kelcey, right? Like a subscription supplement business is really different than the furniture businesses I used to work with, something like that. But the D2C thing is still a huge deal in the way they think about some core things. There is actually some crossover.
What most people think of when they think of a quote unquote D2C business is 80% gross margin, $100 AOV, mostly Facebook ads. They may or may not have turned on Google. They send emails and text messages, and they have a Shopify store. That's what most people think of. And that does apply to like a wide swath of e-commerce businesses or D2C businesses. I don't think it's even a majority, though. I think there's way more businesses that actually don't meet that criteria I just defined. Yeah. And then it makes the generalization challenging.
Yeah. I wonder if like what you have to narrow it to is like bootstrapped D2C or something like that. Like, it's or like almost like profit focused D2C, just because again, like that they're just going to function so differently than a funded D2C, yeah.
Even if you get to a business that's more predicated on, even I had this debate before of like a demand capture business, which is running on Google and maybe Amazon, as opposed to running Facebook ads, like very, very different dynamics and margin profiles in businesses that create demand than those that just capture it.
Yeah. Okay, but let's talk about a couple things that are true in D2C business. So here's why I care about it, because what I think is that there are a couple things that I think are unique to D2C as a channel model, whatever you want to call it, that I think are the most important reasons that I care about this. Number one, the ability to scale at a very low cost of a very low overhead in the business. So what I mean is D2C, one of the things that makes it work, and this is the example I always give, is that it costs basically the same amount of money to send an email to 100 people as it does to 1,000 people to 1 million people, right? Your Klaviyo costs go up some for sure, but the graphic designer who signs the email, the copywriter who writes it, costs the same amount of money. So D2C scales great relative to humans, and this is the thing when you hear D2C people get interviewed on non-D2C channels, like people are like astounded. Like I remember hearing an interview with the head of ButcherBox, the CEO of ButcherBox, where it was like, they're at $500 some odd million, and they're still at like 180 employees, so it netted out to like $3 million in revenue per head, and it's like, the guy interviewing him was like, what? Like he just couldn't believe it, right? Because if you think about tech or something like that, it's like a different universe. So there's or service business, right? Of course, again, completely different. So that's one thing I care about, and I think it is really important that D2C people keep that extremely clear in their minds. That like this is one of the ways your business works is that you have a P&L advantage on your fixed costs, especially if you start to add in things like remote, offshoring, and AI. None of the three of which define 365. I mean, maybe AI does in ways I don't know yet, but the other two, you guys are in office and in Cleveland. But like I don't know. Labor is, I think, pretty free in Cleveland, if I understand it correctly, so it's fine. But like some of those things allow you to keep your fixed costs very low, in a way that is really important to create margin in your business. So that's number one. Number two, and then I'll let you respond. Number two is like I said earlier, like shipping the product from a warehouse to a customer's house is such a core piece of the unit economic profile of a D2C business. Like even just like the problem of last mile shipping, basically, or last mile delivery, right? Like that thing that makes shipping to somebody's house expensive is a really important part of the business. And therefore, like thinking about what kind of products do well and don't do well, and where the advantages and the disadvantages at the level of unit economics specifically for that model are really important. Even as you think about decisions like, should I go into mass retail? That really depends a lot, I think, among other things, on all the dynamics that I just mentioned, essentially like how your unit economic profile works out for D2C. There's a reason why subscription supplement brands are often like, a lot slower to go to mass retail because the thing works so freaking perfectly for the act of shipping something to somebody's house. It's such an ultimate use case for that. So those are the two things that I think of as like crucial to the thing that, and it's the reason I care about it, is I want people to view their D2C businesses with clarity on those two lenses. And understand that deeply in that what powers their business, and understand that the moment they go away from D2C as their core channel, that those things change to some degree.
I like operating leverage as a important thing to understand about the D2C model. Scale there makes a ton of sense. I'm not sure I've thought through the shipping products piece yet. I think a lot of folks use 3PLs. Obviously, if you're an Amazon seller, if you don't touch your products by and large, and those are e-commerce businesses.
E-commerce works in part because you can build operating leverage with low fixed costs as a percentage of your revenue. And the way you can supercharge that strategy is by adding incredibly talented people to your team from the Philippines with my friends at More Staffing. I'm a huge fan of More Staffing. I've worked with them for a long time. They have staffed my business internally. They've staffed friends of mine businesses, and they are going to staff my future e-commerce business that I'm building on the side as well. And it's because they are incredibly talented people who connect you to great talent. And the value proposition is really, really simple. You can hire people with deep, rich e-commerce resumes across every part of the business, and manager levels and up, not just $5 an hour virtual assistants, but like manager level and up, like I said, across operations, marketing, supply chain, like you name it, any part of your business. There is incredible talent in the Philippines that you can add to it. More Staffing connects you to those folks. And here's the way I am doing it and the way I suggest you do it as well. Don't just look for cheap. Look to hire at the top of the market in the Philippines so you attract the best talent, which will still be meaningfully less than that same talent would cost you in the US. That means you get great people working in your business at much lower cost, and that allows you to grow faster and apply, again, more leverage to your business, whether that means hiring more staff or keeping additional margin in your business. There's a bunch of ways to do it, but More Staffing can help you find all of it. They also have a 1-year guarantee on every person they add to your team. That's like way longer than most staffing agencies, which are like a 3-month guarantee. So what that means is that if More Staffing helps you find talent in the Philippines, it doesn't work out for a full year, they will replace that person for free for you. So that's just an incredible deal. Go to morestaffing.co/AF, morestaffing.co/AF to get a conversation started. These are some of my most trusted partners in all of e-commerce. They've been a sponsor of this podcast for a long time because I believe in them so much, and because I've seen over and over the way that they have staffed friends of mine businesses, my business, and beyond. I just can't recommend them highly enough. morestaffing.co/AF. Get started today.
Why are those two things, how does that rubber meet the road on those two things when you're talking to people? Like, why are those important to you in your mind?
Yeah. Well, for one of them, the hidden margin killer in a lot of businesses is shipping costs. Even if you charge, people will say, "Oh, the shipping is fixed. I charge for shipping," but they're doing their math wrong. Because the customer, let's say the customer gives you $25 and $5 goes to shipping, right? So it's like $20 for the product, and then you say, "Oh, I charge for shipping, so no big deal there." What has actually happened is you've now taken a $25 order and added 20% COGS or 20% variable costs associated with every order. So it's not free. It's actually destroyed your margin profile on top of everything else that you're doing. Plus you have to pay credit card fees on that extra $5 you charge. You have to, whatever. So this is a thing that I think people don't think very well about is that. And then there's all kinds of things about, how to think about order value. Value to weight ratio is something I've thought a lot about, and use like the idea of like, if, I cut my teeth at Kalo. This is like a perfect e-commerce business, silicone wedding rings. We were charging $20 for this. It was extremely cheap to make, but also crucially extremely cheap to ship to somebody's door. So you could make the business work.
Please tell me you guys just slip those into the USPS mail stream with a postage stamp, because that's how I would ship those.
Yeah, I mean, they were in like a little like a mesh bag, but yeah, they were basically like that, right? It was extremely, extremely cheap to ship, and so it was a huge advantage in that business, and it was part of the reason why you could live on a much lower AOV than what people think is possible. It's also why AOV can be an overrated metric or an underrated metric, depending on what you look at. Because value to weight ratio is, I think, a better metric than AOV in that respect. And then I think about what products are primed to do well in this space, and this is a big part of it. So how you optimize shipping costs, it's really hard to go like negotiate with USPS or whoever. It's like there's all kinds of, they're just too big and too unwieldy. But like thinking about how you sort of engineer offers and products for the reality that you're going to do that is really crucial. Another one I've seen is like I've seen a food and bev company that like really worked hard. Like it was like, yeah, anyway, it was not like a canned thing. Like it would expire really fast, right? So it needed to get to people's doors quickly. So solving that problem really is like crucial to even whether or not it works as a D2C business, basically.
That sounds less like a D2C business, Andrew, more like a logistics business.
Well, it wasn't. I mean, eventually what they did is they did all the things that everybody else does. They did bi-coastal fulfillment so that they could get from a 3PL to a customer's door faster. They were shipping to further zones less often, which is a really helpful thing. The heavier your product is, the more that matters, is another thing that people don't go after enough. They were thinking about how they package. They redesigned their packaging to make it better and better. Now, what that looked like for that business, which was like a heavy box of food versus again, a supplement business or something like that is really different, but it's the same principle, which is thinking about how your packaging like works out into shipping something to somebody's house, and think about how much like AOV became a crucial thing for them because there was so much margin to be added back, especially on like overnight shipping and things like that. So yeah, there's like a bunch of these things where it's like, it's actually the same principle across a lot of different businesses. It matters more and less depending on which category you're in. But that I think is a really important thing, is that that's such a core thing to the customer experience that getting that right really matters.
I did not expect the bulk of what we would talk about to be logistics and shipping. I think it's actually really interesting that you keyed into so much of that as like the advertising guy. And we just spent 5 minutes with you talking about bi-coastal fulfillment. One thing I think is an interesting follow-on to this is entrepreneurs tend to get like an identity in their business. And if you're an e-commerce business, is it okay to sell on Amazon? When should I really explore mass retail? And is that a shift in my brand strategy? Do you have an opinion as you talk about D2C businesses, e-commerce businesses, and you have people taking advice from you on how to think about the identity of a business and its sales channels?
Yes. I think you should think about sales channels in relation to, so I think Amazon is a fairly obvious extension for most brands. For most brands, I think Amazon is basically additive, not really cannibalistic to your D2C, probably a little bit, but not really additive. And it's just taking e-commerce or D2C, whatever, and extending the reach of it to the most used e-commerce platform in the country, right? So it's just like 50% of e-commerce happens on Amazon. If you're already an e-commerce business, like basically all the things that work in your D2C business work even better for Amazon because their logistics are so perfect. And so in general, I think that's a good idea. The key is to measure differently because, and this is something Taylor's been really hot on recently. I've seen it for a couple clients of mine. You have to then measure the value of your ad spend really differently. You can't just measure it on D2C basis only, because the moment you start getting a meaningful Amazon presence, you're going to have some of your meta ads clicks jump over to Amazon. So I guess that works against what I said about being cannibalistic, but the net effect of it is that it's additive total. So there's also some downstream effects of like growing your search ranking by adding some sales velocity there that creates some organic revenue as well on Amazon. So I think in general, at some point, brands ought to do that. They shouldn't do it too soon, though, because it just adds complexity. So I would think about that as like when you're ready, and if your business makes sense for this, then yeah. If your business requires customers to add like 3 or 5 things to your order, then Amazon doesn't make that much sense, right? But if it's just like one widget, and they're going to buy that one widget from you or from Amazon, or you can package it as a set of 3 of those one widgets on Amazon and do a little cheaper, whatever, then it makes tons of sense, especially in a category where there's some categorical search. For mass retail, I think it's there's some question about margin. I think there's some brands where the mass retail margin makes a big difference. Again, this comes down to shipping. Shipping some things. I'll use this brand because we've talked about it publicly. Curie, who has at various times been a client of mine. Curie is a great example of a brand where like mass retail makes all the sense in the world. Curie is a women's focused clean deodorant brand. So it's a stick or 2 of deodorant at a time. It's not particularly small, so it's not particularly cheap to ship. The margins are good, not incredible in that business. And so the D2C thing there's LTV that's good, not incredible. So there's all of these things that make it so that it's like not a perfect D2C product. On top of that, like, where do women buy clean deodorant? They buy it at Target. And so they should add Target and you should go there, And so to me, it's like a perfect case where a brand is like, you absolutely should be pursuing mass retail as the way to put this in most people's hands. Simple Modern is another good example of this, where they actually built. You
might say it's no longer an e-commerce business and now it's a CPG company.
That's right. That's exactly what I would say. Their business model fundamentally changed. They are no longer a D2C business model. And that was,
not allowed to listen to you anymore.
Well, they fired me because of this. I don't mind saying this at all. This is exactly why they fired me most recently. And it's why I didn't argue with them about it or like fight for it. They came to me and said, we're doing something so different than what we did when we brought you on, right? Sarah has been public on this, so I don't think she'll mind me saying this at all. And more power to him. I have no problem with this, right? Like Sarah came onto my show and talked about, we got to 8 figures or whatever it was in a year doing D2C. Then they added Walmart, and now they've added Target, and they also added Amazon, and suddenly measurement changed a lot. That screwed a whole bunch of things up internally for them. And then on top of that, as they actually at some point she fired me and then brought me back, and then we worked together again. Good relationship, right? As you could tell, we're all friends here. It's no problem. And
we fired you, but we haven't brought you back yet. We need to go full circle. You want to come back on the team?
I don't know if it's bad blood between you and me with all this arguing, but when they brought me back again, they brought in a CMO who had a much more mass retail experience. And I told her on the first day I talked to her, if you have to fire me, it is okay. I understand, because I know you're doing a different thing than you were doing before. Yeah. So I think it reflects exactly the thing that I'm saying here, which is like, it's so fundamentally different to the way you make money. And I just don't have the experience scaling a mass retail business on Facebook ads. You should think about that differently. And so anyway, so like I said, it was like, good luck to you guys. So yeah, I think it perfectly illustrates the thing that I'm saying here, which is that it's such a significant shift.
We just agreed I'm right, and it's not an e-commerce business. This is good. We've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, the thing shifted so much that the model of the business changed. It's a different business model. That's
right.
The
model of the business changed. It was never an e-commerce company. It was a CPG company that chose a sales channel and then chose new sales channels as its vision for its business, which is a women's consumer packaged good.
Yeah.
Needed new and different things from its go-to-market strategies, and it changed how it went to reach the consumer.
If you were thinking about your business the way that Kelcey is thinking about his, the way that I'm trying to think about mine, which is financially first, profit-driven, running a good, profitable, cash-flowing business, you should be thinking about your marketing and e-commerce optimization with help from INTELLIGEMS. INTELLIGEMS is not just split testing software. Yes, they can handle your basic split testing, all of the sort of stuff that Google Optimize used to do for you, but if that's all you're thinking about with INTELLIGEMS, it goes way beyond that. INTELLIGEMS can be a lot more, because you can use INTELLIGEMS to split test much more important things for your profitability than just that. For example, your pricing. The price of your products is one of those things that has a massive impact on not only customers' behavior and relationship to your website, their conversion rate, all those things, but on your margins. If you're thinking margin first, you should be testing your pricing. You should be testing offers, like site-wide offers, individual pages, stacked discounts, the kind of things that people do. Like I had one client recently who moved from a stacked discount where if you added more stuff to the cart, it was 5, 10, 15% off. They tested that against 10, 20, 30% off, 30% off one, 10, 20, 30% off one, and they could measure that down to the level of profit. They've tested their free shipping threshold with this. These are the things that are needle movers for profitability in your business, and INTELLIGEMS is the best tool in the market for testing exactly these kinds of things, in part because not only is it very easy to set up and to deploy so that you can run these tests in real time, which is really awesome, but also you can measure all of it at the level of profit per visit, not just conversion rate, etc. So you can actually plug into your Shopify metrics. So when you're running something like an offer test or a price test, you can actually see how it's affecting the profit of every visitor, not just revenue, not just conversion rate, whatever. It's an incredible tool. Go to intelligems.io today, intelligems.io. You can get 20% off your first 3 months if you use the code FARIS20. It's FARIS20. Check the link in the show notes in the description if you want a link to that. Go check it out. Intelligems.io, incredible tool. Build profit in your business at every step of the customer journey with INTELLIGEMS. Yeah, their entire model changed. I totally agree. Cash moved through the business differently. And so therefore, it is a business model. D2C is a business model because it changed so much they had to change everything they did. So, yeah.
I'm guessing when they file their tax returns, they picked a new industry code too, because it's a new business now.
Who cares? Who cares what the tax returns say? Tax returns probably doesn't even, who knows what year that was made in.
Mm-hmm.
The tax returns probably barely know the internet exists. Yeah. Okay. So what kind of businesses does 365 have, and who do you take advice from? And how do you have a holding company with 6 different brands? Are they all different business models? Like, what's the point of even having a holding company at that point? Like you're not, do you have any shared knowledge between those 6 businesses that makes it useful to have them all together?
Less and less shared than we used to, much more decentralized now than ever before, and now grouped by the things that we have learned to make them unique and different, and to try to not force features from business A into business B, just because they both sell stuff from a website and put it in boxes. Just because they do that, there's not enough common to think that go-to-market strategies or supply chain things are the same. And so the business now has really been chunked into kind of 3 platforms. One's our old school direct response business. 2 of them are more of our demand capture businesses that have just a different demand cycle from the perspective of how we go to market and generate sales and traffic on the websites. And then the third platform is really the demand generation business, much heavier on Facebook and content creation. It's just that businesses need different teams, different financing, different infrastructure. It's kind of been our biggest lesson learned, really, is getting the organizational structure of owning those businesses really aligned with how they go to market, and then also what we think the real business model is. So our preference is to have them be businesses, not brands. So a brand is this like abstract thing that sits between a manufacturer and a consumer, and it's this idea like a pretty middleman, and maybe DTC is guilty of that from time to time, of like, hey, slap a label on it and you have a product now. I think the best businesses are as close to the customer as possible and as close to the raw materials as possible. So whether you choose to go to Target or go to Amazon or do Facebook ads or whatever your sales channel might be, you're controlling from raw materials and supply chain all the way through to final customer delivery. I think the best businesses, the most durable ones, the best to own, are as close on both ends of the spectrum as possible to the product and to the customer.
Interesting. It is interesting. Like, I mean, again, this is probably score a point for Kelcey here, in that like maybe one of the reasons that like you guys are like the last aggregator standing, the last holding company standing, right, is because like what we all realize, certainly one of the things that we realized before 100 when I was running one of these was like, there's just the shared services just don't work. The businesses are too different. And they have different needs, and so like you have to actually split them out. And while each brand may end up having operating leverage at the level of individual brands, the operating leverage doesn't mostly come at the level of the actual holding company. I think maybe a little bit, but not nearly as much as we thought.
There's certainly still a handful of portfolios of different shapes and sizes running. I think that we got 365 got lumped into maybe the venture-backed aggregator bucket. I don't know that was ever really what we intended to do. Maybe we shifted towards that conglomerate style, vertically integrated approach over time, kind of accidentally, like everybody else was doing it. I don't think it was really what we set out for, and it's certainly not what we're doing today. The fact that I'm in e-commerce is just happenstance. I don't think I'm God's gift to marketing or product development or Facebook ads or anything. I'm probably like the least capable in a lot of those areas. I just think that people want to buy things on the internet, and they're going to find brands they know and love, and they're going to choose to buy from them, and hopefully more than once. And if those brands make their product and take care of their customers, and they're in categories that aren't fads and don't go away, they're just good little businesses. It's no different than owning a garage door repair company or a landscaping firm or the local staffing. They're just businesses. So grouping them, the fact they're all in e-commerce, quote unquote, to use your language, or they're all in consumer products. It's not any different than if I bought a landscaping company and an HVAC business and a plumbing company and said, oh, we're going to people's houses. They're all the same. Obviously, those are wildly different services that help consumers in their home.
But you would have so much overlap in the way you thought about those businesses. You would still approach them as like cost of labor as being a crucial thing, and you have to think about your unit economics in relation to labor cost because it's a service business. You'd think about a lot of the way how much money you can spend on marketing to make the business work in general would be, what the margin profile is expected to be, how cash moves through the business. Those things are all so different. Where like a service business has details about those kinds of things in a way that, like, I mean, think about the issue of AP and AR, right? Like, they basically don't exist for a D2C brand, you know?
I'll push back on that.
I guess AP does, but like AR, if you're on Amazon, you know, I don't know. It's just, it's like there is actually quite a bit of similarities between those, because there's something fundamental at the level of the way the business makes money and the way that cash moves through the business that actually does have overlap. I know for a fact that you have media buyers that service all of your businesses, that you have approaches to logistics and warehousing that work through all your businesses, that you know, there are all these things that are actually very similar from business to business to business.
Listen,
even if like
don't let the truth get in the way of a good story. Okay, I'm here to win the argument, not to. We gotta stay on track.
Okay, go ahead. Respond to that. Yeah.
I lost the script.
Well, there's a reason you don't also have an ad agency in there somewhere, even though it could be a good business. Because the muscles you've built on D2C or e-commerce brands are different muscles. It's actually part of the reason I'm not scaling a service business, because I've spent the last 10 years thinking about D2C businesses.
I think as founders, Justin and I's appetite to pursue a business, so the capital behind a acquisition or operation of a company, is that we've learned a lot in the last 8 years of selling stuff on the internet, quote unquote e-commerce. And it would be an uphill learning curve to go do business in a new industry. I fantasize about it all the time. I even threatened to do it. I haven't managed to make it happen yet.
Everybody else's business always sounds easier than yours. So
the grass is always greener. I call it business model envy. That gets everybody.
Yeah. Okay, so come back to the earlier point. Where do you learn from? I mean, have you looked to like your demand gen businesses versus your demand capture businesses? Let's just take those two, right? Which I know exactly what you mean, right? Your demand capture businesses are going to be more Google oriented. How do you win on search? Where's the right place for us to be where people are searching for this kind of thing? Your demand gen businesses are going to be like, how do we win on Facebook ads? That kind of thing. The stuff you brought me in to work with your team on. Okay. So because I want to come back to your earlier point that I really like, which is like you have to be able to learn from the right people. So how do you think about this at the level of individual businesses at 365 to learn from the right people, to like separate out the businesses to see their differences?
Yeah, that's a good point. We've certainly gone in search of people that can help us, yourself included, in places that were easy to identify. I think the biggest list of mistakes that we've had over the years is from trying to force ideas into businesses that just didn't fit. And I think the answer to your question is I don't know that I have it solved. We tried forcing demand gen into demand capture businesses and wasted so much money over the years, convinced that we needed a funnel. We needed a customer avatar and advertising and this and that. And like nobody was going to go get interrupted by a Facebook ad and buy this product. So there was some entrepreneurial overzealousness that if I could go back in time and shake myself, I'd say, hey buddy, it's cool that you want it to work that way. This is how consumers approach this product category. And you can't make them want it. They want it when they do, and they're going to go look for it. And it's going to cost you $1 bajillion on Facebook to convince them otherwise. Just stop trying.
I think I can think of one of the brands you're thinking of here. And one of the funny things about that is that one of the problems is a value to weight ratio problem, actually. In that business, it's like you don't have enough margin either for it to work at the AOVs that they have. Whereas if it's just inbound search, it totally works. So I think in that respect, it kind of comes back to this same thing, which is this idea of shipping the thing to the customer is a big part of the deal. Okay, let's talk about, I mean, and I think, when you brought me in, it was to help you guys develop a muscle that you had a decent muscle at, but wanted a better one. And it was specifically because you had added demand gen businesses where you're like, hey, we're really good at the demand capture side. We probably need a little bit of help thinking about how we scale up the demand gen side with Facebook ads. Can you help us do that? And so we worked through that. And I would say that's a good illustration of your point, which is that those businesses function so differently that you actually needed to develop new.
Let me put a finer point on it. We thought we had a demand gen business, and it turns out we had a demand capture business that was experiencing multiple years of COVID and post-COVID one-time demand spike. And we're still now realizing how one time it truly was. And now it's solidly in the demand capture camp in my brain. But even when we first started working together, we still kind of thought that business was demand genable. And it really, really, really isn't. Now that we're fully out of that cycle of like one-time consumer demand.
You are the last aggregator standing, the last holding company standing.
Thank you.
Not quite exactly. But you're part of the reason I think this thing can work. There's others out there. Zach Stuck's doing it somewhere. I can't tell exactly what his split on brands is, but he talks about, seem like a couple of them that work. Pattern is still out there doing stuff they definitely exist.
Agora, for sure.
Yep. So you guys tell me about what you guys are great at. I know like part of your guys' model has been to think about specifically brands that are distressed and helping solve problems for those, like get a brand where the fundamentals work, but maybe something went wrong and you can save it from being distressed. Is that right?
Yeah, I think what we're finding a niche in is rationalizing a business model to be sustainable. So whether the business was venture backed and no longer has funding support, whether it had an unsustainable overhead structure. I think we've learned enough in the last 8 years of doing this to have a really strong opinion on what a business model should look like without the kind of blinders or rose-colored glasses that a founder might have. I'm guilty of it. You're guilty of it. Every entrepreneur loves their business. Yeah. So I don't want to call somebody's baby ugly, but it's really easy to go cast judgment on something you're walking on day one and there's no emotional attachment. So we have that privilege of having seen and done a fair number of things and walking with fresh set of eyes and many lessons learned to kind of cut through the noise and quickly get down to a working business model. We have been seeing a ton of distressed transactions, whether it's over-levered balance sheet. Oh yeah, lots of them.
Yeah.
Over-levered balance sheets, broken contribution margin models, too much overhead, and the ability to get working capital financing. Just lots and lots of challenging situations for entrepreneurs out there. And you need a fundamentally good contribution margin model on your P&L, and you need a right-sized balance sheet and a right-sized overhead. It's much easier to say than it is to do when you built a team and a culture and you're passionate about things. And when that model no longer works, it's a painful, painful transition. But I think to answer your question is we can find those opportunities, be a good partner to that brand, give the best possible outcome to some stakeholders, and see that brand onto its future.
I'm extremely tempted to belabor some previous points of this conversation in relation to what you just said. I will resist.
Well, let's go.
Because I want to talk about this because you have really interesting things to say about this. So when you guys see those, are you guys still acquiring brands that are in trouble that where you guys can help? Okay.
Yep. For sure.
So you guys are still adding. So you have 6, maybe still adding. Can we talk a little bit about the mechanics of that? What do you guys do? Let's say a brand is drowning in debt. So first of all, we should just say, if you are in that situation and you need to think through potentially a way to,
happy to talk.
Yeah. The email, Kelcey's email is
it's really hard to guess. Episode. Really hard to guess.
Kelcey at 365-holdings.com, but it's in the show notes here. So if you didn't catch that and you don't know how to spell Kelcey, that's fine. You can go check out his email there or follow him on X, which we'll do, and DM him. But can we talk a little bit about sort of how you guys go about actually doing that? Where's the best place to start?
The best place to start is understanding your balance sheet. And that's a comprehensive view of what you have, cash, inventory, and receivables, what you owe, payables, debt, working capital financing, and contingent liabilities. That's unshipped customer orders. That's gift card liabilities. I've seen like a variety of like brand obligations that don't show up on a standard maybe balance sheet when your QuickBooks gets produced, but is a future liability of the company to do something or a promise to a customer or otherwise. That's really an operational concern of, if this brand's going to exist, we need to make good on this future promise, and it needs to be financially quantified in the liabilities of the business. So first is like getting all that information out and in order. And the second is kind of rationalizing it and understanding in today's 2025 Q1 environment, what are lenders doing? What are buyers doing? We have all this uncertainty with tariffs. We have a bunch of lenders that exited the scene over the last 12 months. Valuations are not super great right now. Getting kind of sober about the realities of what the business is worth today. Oftentimes it's not necessarily maybe what's owed. And as a founder, your obligation is to figure out the best path forward. That could be your fiduciary duty to your board, your fiduciary duty to yourself, your fiduciary duty to your lenders, and to your employees and your morals, and like what is the right thing to do for your customers and this business that you built. And if you're in a tough situation, you might need to make some unpleasant decisions about what's your staffing look like? Is it time to transact the business? Do we need to get out of product lines? Do we need to massively change the organizational structure in terms of overhead? Do we need to refund and cancel some customer orders on products we can't fulfill? Do we need to change our expectations about evaluation on the business? There's a lot of things that are going to happen in those conversations.
What do you think people like why do you you've mentioned like maybe needing to let some people go, change some things. Like, do you think people get into that situation because they aren't clear on the financials that make their business work in the first place? Usually, like you mentioned, like needing a right size contribution margin, for example, like create essentially a contribution margin profile in the business that is workable. Like that's the idea, right? So net of variable costs, net of ad spend, there is some way in which this business works before you talk about fixed costs in the business and operating leverage and all that stuff. Okay. So that makes sense to me, right? The idea that you would need to have some kind of model for that. When people don't have that though, or when they have too many employees or when they have a product that isn't working, do you generally think it's because people simply aren't clear enough on what they should be doing in the first place? Or do you think it's because they took a swing and they missed? Do you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah. Some of both. I do think that the level of financial sophistication needed in 2025 to run an e-commerce balance sheet is pretty high. Vendor deposits, unshipped customer, you have this giant working capital gap that could spend, we have a business that working capital might stretch 120 days in either direction between deposits on one side and customer shipped orders on the other. Most e-commerce brands are recognizing revenue on order date, not on ship date. Per accrual accounting, it should be ship date. So if we really go to that extreme, you could have months between outlaying cash and recognizing revenue on an accrual basis. It's just really easy to let bills get piled up and to move money around, and you get a cash advance offer and this and that. I think the answer is both. I really do. I think there's a lot of sophistication needed that maybe people aren't equipped for. Their advisor may or may not be giving them the best financials needed to make those decisions. And even if you have them, I don't know that Kelcey of 4 years ago would have known what to do. Like we've had some bumps ourselves. We've helped a lot of other people. We've done transactions. Like I've learned this on the job. There's no textbook. There's no college class or podcast where I picked this up. It's just almost a decade now of experience. It's hard. It's not a simple, straightforward business model. And things will change. A tariff bill hits your desk and you realize you've ordered all this product and your dynamics of your pricing needs to change yesterday. And you're running ads, and like it's challenging for sure. You literally just called it a business model. Point for Andrew.
Yeah. Okay, but let me double down on that. When I've said a lot of times and been public about just how bad of a CEO I was at 4x400. When I try to answer this question for myself, it is exactly what you just said, which is like both it is pretty hard and also I was not clear enough. I was trying to be pretty clear. I was not clear enough on I did not have enough of a model in my mind of what would make these businesses work and what makes a really good e-commerce business. And I didn't have a way to think. I wasn't thinking through that with anywhere near the clarity. So we got into a lot of problems. And some of that was also because of the holding company model and just like the reality of different businesses have different advantages and disadvantages, and a lot of aggregators find themselves in the place where one opportunity just is much higher than the other ones, and so they focus there, and that's kind of normal. But also like a lot of the mistakes, a lot of the trouble we got in was just because I was not clear enough on those kinds of things, and so I just ended up driving the boat like into some rough waters because of some bad decisions that I just wasn't clear enough about. And I think it's where like listening to you talk about this is really helpful. So maybe that's another. Go ahead.
I think you want to get clear on the aggregator portfolio model that you do have a portfolio and outcomes will vary. And so you need to take some level of founder passion off the table and start to follow the numbers because like you want them all to win, but they're not all going to. So it's definitionally going to happen. Much like we've tried to group by business model, is it a demand capture business or demand creation business? What is its go-to-market strategy? We've tried to also, in our heads as founders and people running the day-to-day of the business, really, really get comfortable with the differences in the cash conversion cycles and the differences in the ebb and flow of how these businesses just run operationally. Could be seasonality, could be the cash conversion cycle, could be just the demand on the team as far as overhead. Is it more of a steady state business or is it more of a we're always building, always kind of creating new things? And getting clear on that and really having a bird's eye view of it from a strategic view is incredibly helpful. Inside of one business, I think that happens at like the product portfolio level. Like if you have 10 SKUs or 10 different categories of SKUs inside of them, you basically have the same exercise of like, what are my cash cows? What are the ones that create LTV? What are the ones I'm acquiring customers on? And you're kind of playing 3D chess all the time, trying to look at your business from different angles to figure out the next best step forward in your plan.
Okay, I think you can help people. I think if people are struggling and are thinking about what they need to do next, and there is a gap between Kelcey of 4 years ago or Andrew of 400 and yeah. Kelcey today, and hopefully myself
there's
today.
There's no super hard like sales pitch. We talked to lots of people we can help, lots of people we can't help. I had a transaction I thought we were going to pursue a couple weeks ago. They got a super good cash offer. I'm like, hey, you should go take that. That's much better than what we can do for you. I'm happy just to have kind of entrepreneur to entrepreneur conversation. If it leads to a deal or something, great. If I can just be helpful. I think that there's a lot of challenges out there. I'd be particularly wary of what you have guaranteed personally and what is a corporate debt. If you're a founder, just be aware of like what you're on the hook for and what you're not. Some things that catch people by surprise is all the trust taxes. So sales tax collection, payroll taxes, statutory things like wages payable, vacation time, 401k plan contributions. There's a lot of things that you can be on the hook for and have personal liability. So if you are not sure where you stand financially, I'd get really, really clear on what your obligations are so that you know what your own risk is in a transaction or in a business trouble spot.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect lead into the idea. Just reach out to Kelcey about that. I think that's a good call. And
now, I'm not a lawyer, but like,
but this
is like a bullet point list.
This is the exact point, right? Which is like, the idea that you've sort of picked up a bunch of knowledge along the way, and now you can speak to a lot of those things with clarity because you've got that sort of hard-won wisdom, as you've probably made mistakes on all those things that you just talked about, as I have.
Literally that list, yes.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, awesome. Someday, Kelcey, we will have to do a podcast about something you told me about a long time ago that I've never really heard the full story about. Maybe it'll never become public, about some trouble spot you guys got into that was a challenge. So I don't know if that'll ever become public or not, but someday, at the very least, you and I will have to talk about it at DCF Live this year. So
give me a rain check. It will be discussed at DCF Live, and give me a rain check. We'll record it.
Okay, great. All right, so reach out to Kelcey. All the information for that is in the show notes. Kelcey, thanks for your time, man. I think this was everything I hoped this conversation would be, which is I actually think it is a really useful.
So we decided then it's not a business model, or we aligned there.
I won when you called it a business model 2 minutes ago.
You gave me like 3 points in the whole conversation. I gave you 1. I think that merits. All right,
if you call it,
we'll call it a draw, and next time we'll settle this like men.
That sounds good. All right. Thanks, Kelcey.
Appreciate you, man.
If you liked that episode as much as I enjoyed recording it, I love that conversation with Kelcey. You should subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. I've got all kinds of great stuff like this all the time, a mix of sort of higher level P&L, financial thinking like this, mixed with really highly tactical stuff that's actionable today, right now in your business. Try to do a real mix of both. Go subscribe wherever you're watching or listening to this. And also subscribe to my newsletter, which you can do at ajfgrowth.com. Just drop your email address in the pop-up or the footer there. You will get that. It's once a week, one highly tactical insight, and then a couple links out to anything else I'm doing here and there, but I'm not going to spam you. It's 1 email a week. That's that. You can follow up with everything else I'm doing at ajfgrowth.com and email me at podcast@ajfgrowth.com or follow me on X at Andrew J. Ferris. Thanks so much for watching or listening. I will talk to you next time.